Good morning, Washington, D.C., and good afternoon, Berlin and Dubai. And I am in Beirut, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation with very eminent people in their own fields. And let me start by welcoming the U.S. Special Representative on the issue of Venezuela, Elliott Abrams, the U.S. Representative on the issue of Iran, Brian Hook, Lebanon's former Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Nasser, Saidi, and the Executive Director of Körber-Stiftung, Nora Mueller. This is E-Policy Circle number 7. I'm Raghida, Dergham, hosting you from Beirut, but the summit, this is a run-up to the summit, Beirut Institute Summit in Abu Dhabi, which will be held in March 2021. And we are holding these E-Policy Circles as part of the package of having the great summit that I have welcomed some of you to it. You've honored me. And so I will start with exactly what we've done every time till now. Every one of you will get 4 minutes to come to the table with what you wish. And then I'll follow through on some couple of follow-ups. And then we will engage in, I'm sure, what is going to be an exciting conversation. Thank you very much. Please, Elliott Abrams.
Thank you, Raghida. It's great to see you. And I look forward to being back with you in the Emirates next year. Of course, we're talking a bit about stability here. The greatest threat to stability in South America and the Caribbean today is the dictatorship in Venezuela. And we are discussing Iran and Venezuela today. And these two dictatorships have much in common: mismanagement, massive corruption, brutality. And there's something else that is common to both now. The world now understands this. There's no debate about the nature of either regime. The days when Zarif was the toast of the town, posing as an enlightened spokesman for a misunderstood religious government, those days are gone. The days when the Maduro regime was viewed as a slightly down-market version of Chavismo are gone. These are two hardened tyrannies. This very week, the Maduro regime destroyed the independence of the National Election Commission and took over several opposition parties. And both of these regimes, Venezuela and Iran, are more and more isolated in the world. In that sense, it's not surprising that they have found each other. Iran really has no friends at all and thinks it might find gold in Venezuela, literally. It takes Venezuelan gold to pay for gasoline. The Maduro dictatorship has a few friends: Cuba, to some extent Russia and China and Turkey, now Iran, but what kinds of friends are these? Cuba's bankrupt. Iran demands cash or gold before it will ship 1 gallon or liter of anything. Russia and China have backed away financially. No new loans or investments in over a year. So these are two pariah states. The U.S. Policy that we've pursued since January of last year is to deny resources to the Maduro dictatorship, thus our sanctions, which deny the regime income. In fact, yesterday, the Association of Greek Ship Owners, which is the largest such association in the world, announced that its members are entirely out of the Venezuela trade. Venezuela's oil exports now are the lowest they have been in 70 years. Now, when we talk about stability, we have to mention that the Maduro dictatorship has created 5 million migrants and refugees, and this burden is a very heavy one for Latin America, South America, particularly, and the Caribbean. It's the largest refugee crisis in the history of Latin America. And by the end of this year, it will likely be larger than the Syrian refugee crisis. And it's entirely man-made, you know, no earthquake, no tsunami. It's the product of human action by corrupt, venal, brutal rulers. In our view, the solution is easy to describe. Those rulers must go. Venezuela needs a transitional government of all parties to govern until free elections can be held for parliament and president. And that's the goal of US policy. And unfortunately, until that happens, Venezuela will continue to export instability to its neighbors. Why don't I stop there, Raghida, and we'll come back, obviously, to all of this.
Let me follow up with a couple of quick things, Elliott, Abrams. The foreign minister, Iranian foreign ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi, he said, in that sense of referring to the tankers going and the gold coming, he said, we showcased our might, and our biggest display of power was the imposition of our will on the enemies, he means, and the sailing of the oil tankers through high seas from the Persian Gulf towards Venezuela. This is a showcase of the might, and there are news from Tehran that some in the military they are thinking that if they could revenge with oil tankers, meaning seizing some oil tankers. Is this on the horizon and what you are expecting?
You know, Iran has gasoline to sell because its economy is in such a mess. The consumption of gasoline in Iran is quite low compared to previous years. So they have gasoline to sell, and Venezuela has gold and needs gasoline. What we are doing is, first of all, making sure that ships of all nations now turn away from this trade and refuse to engage in this trade. Only Iran will engage in this trade. We'll see if they have enough tankers actually to do it. Venezuela will need a constant relay of ships, constant. I don't know if Iran really has enough ships to do that. And if they do, what are the opportunity costs? What trade are they not engaging in to concentrate only on Venezuela? So we'll see how this evolves. It is interesting, isn't it, though, that Russia's not shipping gasoline, China's not shipping gasoline, only Iran.
But wait a second, they're taking gold out of Venezuela. They are shipping gold out of Venezuela, both China and Russia, and they don't care about the sanctions you're imposing.
The sanctions are not on the sale of gold, on the shipment of gold. They are on this gasoline trade in the oil sector. But again, you know, the Russians backed away from Venezuela. Rosneft, you will remember, was sanctioned by the United States. What did they do? They immediately said, okay, we're gone, we are out. So Rosneft is now not doing business in Venezuela. They're out. The Chinese investments in Venezuela in 2020, 2019, zero. Mm-hmm. So you end up in this little corner with Iran.
Okay. Thank you, Elliott Abrams. I'm going to give the floor to Brian Hope. Please, Brian Hope. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think it would have been last weekend we would have been attending your summit in Abu Dhabi.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Such is the nature of the times. Thank you very much for bringing Elliott and I together virtually. Our offices are separated only by a wall. We're neighbors, and so here we are virtually. Elliott and I do work a lot together, and there are so many commonalities that have emerged in our files, partly in our strategy. We've applied enormous economic pressure on these two regimes. We have pursued a policy of diplomatic isolation, and given these two regimes, they really don't have many friends left in the world. And so now we see them coming together to see if, you know, Iran very much needs revenue and Venezuela very much needs gasoline. And then this creates an opportunity for these two countries to work together. Another thing they have in common, Iran and Venezuela are not poor countries. They're very rich countries, but they're governed by thieves. And especially in the case of Iran, the Islamic Republic, the elite, have been robbing the Iranian people for decades. And then they spend it on foreign adventurism. Take Syria, for example, where the Iranians have spent over $10 billion. And when you think about, this is to save Assad and to keep him in power. When you think about, even if they'd spent 10% of that on a better healthcare system to prepare for things like COVID, or to improve roads and schools and water resource management, which has been a catastrophe. So they have prioritized ideology over the welfare of their own people. Another interesting data point that these two countries have in common, the IMF and the World Bank said that the three worst performing economies in the world are Libya, Iran, and Venezuela. And so they have this in common as well. These are countries that have been robbed of decades of economic progress. I mean, in the Middle East, look at Tehran and then compare it to places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Doha, a number of cities in the region that have been so successful. And these are examples of governments that invest in their own people. So that's what we would like to see. We would like to see the Iranian government invest in its own people instead of investing in a sort of Shia crescent that they have been trying to build out for many years. Our policies have helped to reverse that. We have had enormous success through our period. Exports are down. The Iranian economy is in deep contraction, and that was even before COVID. The government budget is facing massive funding shortfalls that it has no idea how to fix, and their access to foreign exchange reserves is minimal. And so this is why Iran has one of the worst performing economies in the world. We have deprived this regime of historic levels of revenue. There is no precedent in this Islamic Republic's 41-year history of this kind of economic pressure. And we've been relentless about it because the regime, from the time the president got out of the Iran deal, made very clear, you can either come to the table and resolve our differences diplomatically, or you can manage economic collapse.
Brian Hook, the United States announced today a number of names related to the Caesar Act. Of course, the Caesar Act, you will explain it. It is related to Syria and whoever supported the regime in Syria, whether they are Russians or Iranians or Lebanese. And let me give you the chance to explain to us some of the names and why are some of the names on at least the first wave that is coming out of the relationship to the Caesar Act. Can you give us some of the names and explain why, please, Brian?
Well, the Caesar Act was passed by Congress. It was signed into law by President Trump. And then over the last 180 days since he signed it, we've been pulling together the names of the people that are contributing to this needless and brutal war that has killed 500,000 Syrians and Arabs, and also created the worst refugee crisis since World War II. This war needs to end. And Secretary Pompeo announcing the designations of 39 people, including Bashar al-Assad and his wife, and a number of other people who are complicit in perpetuating and intensifying this conflict. So this is, I think you're right, this is the first wave. You should expect to see more names added to this list. And the people that then engage in transactions with the people who have been designated are at risk of being cut off from the global financial system. And they will find themselves on a blacklist that it's going to be very hard to get out of. So we encourage people to avoid doing business in any transactions with the people we designated.
I want to go back later on to tell you what the Secretary General of Hezbollah said about this when we engage in the conversation. But quickly, before I go to our next guest for his comments, what's the significance of putting Asma al-Assad on this list?
Well, it shows that we're quite serious about getting to an irreversible political process that is going to improve the stability of Syria and to improve the lives of the Syrian people. I think when you look at these dictatorships, as Elliott was talking about earlier, whether it's in Tehran, Damascus, or Caracas, they have no care for their own people. And you look at other countries in both of these regions, and we have great examples of governments that invest in their own people. We also have notorious examples of those that brutalize and murder their own people. In November, the Iranian regime murdered 1,500 of its own people and injured thousands. Assad has caused so much suffering, needless suffering, in order to stay in power, just like the Iranian regime. So I think this is a very strong signal. People should understand that if we are willing to target and designate Assad that no one who is involved in these atrocities should feel safe.
Whether Syrians or non-Syrians.
Anybody who is complicit in perpetuating the war machine needs to stop doing transactions with the people that we have designated.
Thank you, Brian Hook. I'm going to go to Nasser Saidi, and 4 minutes to you, Nasser Saidi. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm going to start off from your title, Stability Redefined, and I want to change tack a little bit and talk a little bit more about the economic situation, which we haven't discussed so far. And the word of warning right from the beginning. The MENA region, and particularly the Near East, might be heading for another lost decade. We've already had severe underperformance in the past 10 years. We're now having a global recession, a regional deep recession. We're expecting real income, real GDP to decline by more than 4%. The oil market is in total disarray and oil prices have cratered. And on top of that, we now have COVID. The net result of all this is, of course, higher unemployment. And we already have one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, particularly of youth, in excess of 35%. Those are daunting numbers. In addition to refugees, which we discussed, our region has 60% of the world's refugees. And at the same time, poverty rates are increasing. So what we are looking forward to is really a very dismal economic and social and humanitarian situation. And we need to realize that this is not going to be improving. It's going to get, if anything, worse. Now let me turn to sanctions. And I can see the impact of sanctions on Iran. It's very clear, along with the lower oil prices. But what we need to think of is post-sanctions, even if they succeed, and what is the measure of success of sanctions? I think we need to move towards more regionalism. What I mean by more regionalism is that the voice of the region needs to be heard, and we need to get more engagement by the countries of the region. It cannot be solely the US through sanctions. And that to me means maybe working towards a non-aggression pact in the Gulf countries to include all countries surrounding the Gulf. Number two, I think we need to de-escalate. If you look at how much we spend on arms in the region, it's about 5.8% of GDP back in 2018 and has not improved. We should be using that for economic development, not for building up more military assets. Then I think the next question is, what do we do? Where do we move forward? I think in terms of moving forward, we need to think about nation rebuilding. We have countries across the region that have been destroyed for whatever reasons. What we need to do is to start talking economics and not so much politics, and put on the table the need for reconstructing the countries of the region. So I think the agenda, if you want to talk about stability redefined, should be focusing on economic development and reconstruction of countries that have gotten destroyed.
Yeah. Thank you very much for going into the larger picture, Nasser Saidi. But can you be specific a little bit about, for example, your warning about the situation, the dire situation in some countries? Your own country, Lebanon, is in a very bad situation.
That's right.
Care to just quickly tell me, you keep saying we, I don't know which we you're talking about. Can you be specific to tell me which we got us to the way where we are?
Oh, in the case of Lebanon, I think that's straightforward. You have a very corrupt political class that has wasted resources, and that has led to the demise of Lebanon and turned it into a failed state today. What we need to do is to think of how we get out of that failed state. It may very well be that we want to move towards a third republic, but we also need to help Lebanon in terms of resources. So when we talk about we, I know who we mean.
Okay.
I have no illusions about that.
We also criticized sanctions. You said, you know, we have to think of the impact, not only the sanctions. Do you think the American sanctions?
Well, I think there are two issues. I think there are two issues. Right. I think there are two issues.
No, just a quick question, because we were
sanctions are a tool. You need to say, what is your final end game? What is the strategy?
Okay, so the question.
Let's suppose we get rid of Bashar tomorrow, and I don't like him. What do we do after Bashar? What comes next? We have not been very good at rebuilding nations. We've been very good at destroying nations.
Let me just, I'm sure the American delegates here will get back to you on this, but the point is that they're not saying they want to rebuild nations. You're saying that. And the question...
I think we need that, yes.
Just a second. It's difficult in this situation. My question to you was, do you oppose the American sanctions on Hezbollah?
No, I think the issue of sanctions is one issue. The issue post-sanctions is the true issue to my mind. What do we do to rebuild the Lebanon I want?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Nora, Mueller, you have heard a lot of food for thought. I'm sure you've come with your own thoughts. 4 minutes to you, please.
Thanks very much, Raghida. It's great to be here at the e-policy circle. And yes, as usual, the Europeans get the last word, I guess. Let me maybe by way of an introduction start by saying, when we talk about Europe and Europe's role in a post-pandemic world, what can it do for stability, that there's a lot of talk about the upcoming German EU presidency. And my advice to all of us here would be, don't get too excited about this presidency, because it will be mainly about two things. It will be about holding the club together, i.e. holding the European Union together, which is no small feat in the current situation. Plus, it will be about setting economic recovery in Europe on track. Now, of course, this begs the question, what about this whole story about Europe's footprint on the global stage then? And that brings me to my first point I wanted to make. I think that in the post-pandemic world, soft power will not be enough for Europe. I think this post-pandemic world is a world more according to Mr. Hobbes than according to Mr. Kant. So it's a world less peaceful, a world more insecure, and a world more competitive. So if we as Europeans want to thrive in this world and want to be shaper of international politics in this world, I think we have to put on some muscle. So what do I mean by muscle? Of course, we have to invest more in our defense capabilities. This is not new, but it still holds true, both within the context of the EU and, as a nod to our American friends, also within the context of NATO, obviously. I think we're well advised to become more of a geo-economic actor, in the sense that we should be more aware of the nexus between economic interdependence and political clout, political leverage, as other actors do as well. And I think we will also have to define our position between the US and China. And here my personal view is that we as Europeans, we cannot and we should not be neutral. We are part of the political West. And I think we should also take China for what it is, a partner, but also increasingly a systemic rival. Now, I'm not a dreamer, and I know that all of this won't happen overnight. Maybe it won't happen at all, but I think at least there are some promising signs here. If I could, because this is a discussion also about the Middle East, I wanted to make one additional point. I think that Europe won't become a heavy weight in the Middle East, but I think that it should up its game. Very much echoing what Nasser Saidi said earlier on, I see a number of opportunities. First of all, I do believe that we should maintain the levels of humanitarian aid and development assistance we've been giving so far. And this is a tall order, really, in light of the budget pressures we are facing at the moment. then I think we should also raise our political profile. And here I see an opportunity in pushing for a comprehensive security architecture in the Gulf region. Now, this is a topic which for a long time used to be a non-starter, and people would, start yawning once you mentioned the idea. But I think in a post-pandemic world, which has left a number of countries weaker and also poorer, this is something we should look into. I know I'm running out of time, Raghida, so just two more points. I think as Europeans, and I know there are some different opinions here on this call, we should also try and keep the JCPOA on life support at least until November 3rd. And my third point is that there might be an opportunity when it comes to Syria. Assad is under tremendous economic pressure, and was so even before the Caesar Act. Russia is not very happy with Damascus either. So maybe this may be an opportune moment for some concerted international effort to push for a new political process. These are some thoughts from Berlin.
No problem. Thank you very much, Nora Mueller. So are you supporting, or are you supportive of the Caesar Act implementation in the case of Assad, and you're thinking that it might bring him to negotiate? Is this what you're thinking, that he would accept the political process, be it Astana led by the Russians or otherwise? Is this what you're suggesting? First, I report it and
let me maybe say a word about the Caesar Act, and I'm not familiar with all the details, but it seems to me that the Caesar Act is possibly more targeted or more part of the maximum pressure campaign against Iran than with regard to Syria. I think that Syria has been under tremendous economic pressure even before the Caesar Act, also related to the dire situation, the dire economic situation in Lebanon. So I believe that, the Caesar Act may only be one further element in a much more complex picture. So I do believe that, the fact that the Assad regime has come under enormous economic pressure may form an opportunity, and it may also form an opportunity when it comes to coordinating with other international powers, including Russia.
So, Elliott, Abrams, do you see it the same way like Nora Mueller?
First, I think the Syria Act is really about, I think the sanctions on Syria, the Caesar Act, are really about Syria. Are they about Iran? Well, only in the sense that it is impossible to think of the events in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, without thinking about Iran. So sure, they're in the background, but it's really about Syria itself. There is a maximum pressure campaign on Iran, and Brian Hook can obviously speak about it. He's the best person in the U.S. government to speak about it. But Syria, while not unrelated in any way, is a separate problem. And I think the utility of the Caesar Act moves is to remind us, what is the problem? The problem starts with Bashar al-Assad. A different person, a different family would have been in a different situation. And you asked, why Asma? If you go back a few years, she was on the cover of fashion magazines. She was a liberal. She was enlightened. And what we're saying in these designations is she is a war profiteer.
Interesting. Listen, I have to ask you a couple of things related to Venezuela, because then we're going to engage into the different, except it is related to this part of the world. Alex Saab, who is associated with Hezbollah, allegedly anyway, he was arrested in Cape Verde, and this is of what's going on with Venezuela. Can you try to put this together for us? What is next in that sort of relationship? Are you targeting Hezbollah via Venezuela as well? Elliott, Abrams?
We see an enlarged role for Iran in Venezuela, I would say, certainly this year, and probably over the last couple of years. Again, I think because as China and Russia have pulled back, the regime has looked for any friends it can find, and it seems to have found Iran. And with Iran, where there is Iran, you have the danger of seeing the IRGC, the Quds Force, and Hezbollah. So we are watching very carefully for this and for their presence. Their presence has more been in the south, in the so-called triangle area in the past. So at this point, I would say, with the larger Iranian role, we always worry about a larger Hezbollah role as well. And we will watch that with a microscope.
Brian Hook, let me stay on this issue of what was mentioned a bit earlier, from the Caesar Act to the role of Hezbollah. As I said before, yesterday, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, spoke in a very firm and very threatening language. He basically said that this Caesar Act is the act in the last it is the last US weapon. He's saying basically that Syria has won, to use his words, and that the allies of Syria will never allow the downfall of Syria in this economic war. He's saying that, you know, the allies and Hezbollah will stay the course, and that, as I told you, Lebanon will never close. I mean, what is the answer to that? He's saying that we're going to fight you. You're going to choke us economically, saying in his words. We're going to fight you. You're going to try to kill us, in his words. We're going to kill you. Brian Hook?
Well, I think this is the typical bluster that you would get from somebody in a position of weakness. Our economic pressure campaign, because it's been so effective against Hezbollah's banker back in Tehran, that in March of last year, Hassan Nasrallah had to undertake a fundraising drive. And he had to deploy little banks and grocery stores asking people to donate their spare change. And I saw billboards up asking people to text donations to Hezbollah. That's simply because our campaign of economic pressure is seeing the kind of results that we expected when we started it 3 years ago. If you want to weaken Iran's proxies, you have to weaken Iran. And one of the big failings, one of the most faulty premises of the theory of the case on the Iran nuclear deal was that by reaching an accommodation with Iran and encouraging business with the regime, you are going to make Iran's proxies richer. And the United States ended all of our banking and oil sanctions. The oil sector is the regime's chief source of revenue to fund its malign activity. And so we went after the oil very hard. We've gone after the banking sector very hard in order to dry up the revenue. And so Hassan Nasrallah today is much weaker than he was when we took office 3 years ago. And that's because of a policy that is rightly formulated.
He is also accusing the United States of starving both the Syrian people and the Lebanese people. Hassan Nasrallah is proposing to turn to Iran in order to circumvent what he's saying is calling the dollar issue, accusing the United States of taking the decision to withhold dollars for political purposes, and then therefore intentionally hurting the Lebanese people, making them weak and starving. So he's pledging that he will not allow Lebanon to go hungry, and that the way out of this is to turn to Iran to say, forget about the American dollars, we're gonna do business in the lira, Lebanese lira, and then the Chinese are gonna be there to help us out, and to, you know, the business people and otherwise. Is this, from your point of view, doable? Is this a pipeline dream, or is this a plan? Ryan Hope.
Well, I think Nasrallah is shedding crocodile tears for his own people. You know, if you look at Tehran or Hezbollah, these are not entities that care about their own people. And it's always fascinating to watch them suddenly have this awakening where they care deeply about their own people. And if only the American sanctions weren't in effect, it would all just be some sort of paradise. The truth of the matter is Hezbollah has, I think, undercut the security and the prosperity and the welfare of the Lebanese people in the same way that the Iranian regime has done that for the Iranian people. One thing I'll point out, which is very important, this is the standard talking point. Whenever they start feeling pressure, they start to say that American sanctions are hurting the people. Of course, prior to that, they've shown no interest in the welfare of their own people. In Iran, you had protests in all 31 provinces, all against the regime. There was not a single protest against American sanctions, against President Trump, against our foreign policy. And that's because the Iranian people know where to place the blame for their economic malaise. It's not like this started in the last 3 years. This has been going on for 41 years. And the massive protests you saw in Lebanon are another example of that in October. People are tired of the corruption, which has collapsed the economy. They're tired of the lack of accountability. They're tired of the elite are rich and the poor are, and the sort of everybody else is quite poor. We are exposing these regimes for what they are, and they hate it. They're not used to being told no.
Nasser Saidi, what do you think of the proposal of Hassan Nasrallah that you can turn to the lira, forget about the dollar, can turn to Iran, forget about the American plan, go to China, and will be saved. Lebanon will be saved, and he's saying, at any rate, this what he calls weapons for bread or bread for weapons. He said we have a plan. He pledged that he would never allow it to happen. So what is, you are an economist, above all, take it from here on any level you want, both economically and politically. Is that doable to turn to the Lebanese lira as the rescue in light of the downfall of the dollar value, sorry, the lira value for the strong dollar?
No, of course, that's a pure illusion. Nobody's going to deal with you in Lebanese pounds. They are not convertible, and you cannot transfer them anywhere nowadays. You might have done that years ago, but certainly not today. So the idea that you could turn eastward towards Syria, Iraq, or Iran to rescue Lebanon through trade is certainly not feasible and will not rescue Lebanon in any way. What Lebanon needs, on the other hand, on the contrary, is to reach a deal with the IMF under a program and a plan which has conditionality to address the sort of issues we care about. We have to address corruption above all. We have to address the waste that has led to the situation in Lebanon. And we need a change in terms of the politicians that have led us to where we are. So I'm very active in terms of civil society and action on the ground, and we'd like to see change. The main issue, it seems to me, is how do we put pressure on Lebanese politicians to effect change? I'm not sure that so far, by isolating Lebanon, that we will get change. That is a worry I have. When I see that we're reaching depression levels in Lebanon, i.e. we're going to have a decline of real GDP of 15%. I have 50% of the population in dire poverty, 25% of the population in food poverty. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to use that to change regimes and to change the political class. We've been active since October, and here we are in June, and I've seen no reform. What I'd like to see is more pressure on the politicians. Sanctions may be a tool that the United States wants to use in Syria, Iran, and elsewhere. My concern right now, as a Lebanese, is how do I rescue Lebanon?
What do you mean pressure? What are you proposing? If you're saying that sanctions are not good enough as pressure, or maybe whatever you're saying, but sanctions, you know that the government has
it is straightforward. It is straightforward.
Please.
For example, since September last year, since September 2019, we've seen more than $25 billion escape Lebanon. And those are mainly, of course, very rich people, but also politicians. Let's have access to who they were. Let's have a stolen asset recovery program. That's where I would like to have assistance and help. Let us get this money back because it is our money.
Okay, let's
that's where I would like to see assistance.
kindly let me, just because, just kindly let me get in to ask you precisely, and then you can, so that we don't speak on top of each other. Let me ask you, who are you asking to do this for you? Who are you saying?
Oh, this is straightforward. The stolen asset recovery program is something that's done under the auspices of the World Bank and the United Nations, but all nations participate in that. So for example, we've asked the Swiss to assist. The Swiss are willing to assist. The Europeans also would be willing to assist, and so would the United States. And the United States has a very important role to play because all these transfers were in US dollars. They go through SWIFT, and this can be accessed. That information can be accessed. So that's the sort of help that we would need.
I just want yes or no from the other three guests. Is this a reasonable thing that Nasser Saidi is asking Nora Mueller? Like yes or no in like 20 seconds, because I want to move on to something else. Is that something reasonable? Are you willing to play a role? You are, you are Germany after all, and you're also the next presidency.
Well, Germany is always ready to help stabilize the MENA region. So in that sense, let's leave it here.
So you're willing to help try to trace 20 to 25 billion dollars that have been stolen out of Lebanon and probably through the Swiss banks, or maybe, of course, there are dollars, and he's asking Europe and the US to do something about that.
In all honesty, Raghida, I'm not sure I have enough insight into policy making here in Berlin, so I can't answer.
I'm going to take this question to Elliott, Abrams, and Brian Hook. Is this something that you think the US can be helpful with?
Well, I think we can be helpful if there is, first of all, if it's a World Bank program, and secondly, if we think these are illicit transfers.
Brian, do you want to say anything else on this? Because
no, I don't have anything beyond what Elliott said.
Oh, very good. Nora Mueller, let me go back to you. It seems that there is a movement, a move by France and Germany and one other European country in terms of pressuring the Iranians on the IAEA inspectors' access. Is this something that you feel will get you some results, or do you think the Iranians are so angry with you Europeans that they're going to say, well, we're not going to trust you anymore because you promised us relief through Instax, whatever it's called, and then you didn't deliver? What are you trying to do? And what do you mean by asking to stay the course till November 3rd? I assume you mean the elections in November 4th. What is that thing that you said earlier? What was the purpose of making it a point?
Right. So let me, start at the very beginning. I still am firmly convinced that keeping the JCPOA in place is in the security interest of Europe, and therefore, whatever we Europeans can do to salvage this deal, we will definitely do. I think the big question at this point in time is whether the Iranians will be willing to stay course. It seems to me that there is also a trend in Tehran to say, we will keep a low profile until the US elections and then see whether there will be movement on the American side. So therefore, I don't expect a decisive action from the Iranian side at this point in time.
Brian Hook, what do you say about what Nora Mueller just stated?
I think the Iranian regime is likely waiting to see what happens in November. I think their calculus all along is whether their resistance is greater than our pressure. And we have achieved historic results in terms of economic pressure and diplomatic isolation, standing with the Iranian people, restoring military deterrence. We're very proud of our record. Ultimately, the regime has to decide what it wants. And we have provided the regime with so many diplomatic off-ramps in order to resolve our differences diplomatically, not just us, President Macron, Prime Minister Abe, Sultan Qaboos. A number of countries have gone to the regime and asked them to de-escalate and come to the table. And the Iranian regime gives the same answer of mind your own business. So the regime is pre-COVID, it was on the verge of a depression. It's going to continue to get worse for them. They are hoping that they can grind it out until November. For those who are still supporting the deal, there isn't going to be much left of the deal when you rejoin it, if that ever comes to pass. The arms embargo and the travel ban that were passed by the UN Security Council expire in October. And then the missiles started expiring 3 years later, and it's going to continue to unravel. I think a lot of people forget that the Iran nuclear deal is a temporary and modest non-proliferation plan. It's not even an agreement. Foreign Minister Zarif told me that in person. They couldn't agree to call it an agreement. It's only a plan. That's why it's the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It has no legal status. It's a political commitment made by a president who left office over 3 years ago.
I have a question for you, Brian Hope, and it's from the Right Honorable Jack Straw. And he says, you are correct in your claim about the economic damage being caused to Iran by the US sanctions and the fall of oil prices, and about the scale of popular dissent often put down brutally by the regime. But where is the evidence that the US strategy will lead to a change for the better in the political control of Iran? Brian Hope, Jack Straw's question to you.
Well, it's nice to hear from Jack. That's a very good question. It's the right question to ask. Here's how we look at it. There's no precedent in the 41-year history of this regime moderating or changing its behavior without economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, and the credible threat of military force to defend our interests. If talking nicely with this regime worked, we would have solved this 41 years ago. But this is the language the regime speaks. And we have had prior success with this in other administrations. If there is pressure in place, at some point the regime becomes pragmatic. It's highly ideological, but it has a real knack for sort of survival. So at some point, we believe they will come to the table. If it's before November or after November, that's a question for them. But if you don't have those three things that I spoke about earlier, you're dead in the water with this regime. And one other thing I'll mention quickly, we tried sanctions relief. It's called the Iran nuclear deal. And Iran used the cover of the deal to expand in all of those non-nuclear threats that include ballistic missile testing, the space launch vehicle, regional aggression, hostage taking. Ballistic missile testing increased during the Iran nuclear deal. So I think the burden is on the other side to demonstrate that a policy of accommodation is more effective than a policy of pressure and isolation.
And also you have said recently, Brian Hook, and you spoke about the Iranian funding to Yemen's Houthis. You indicate that you might want to find a way to stop that funding. How is the United States pushing to stop or to abort some of the funding or all of the funding of Iran to the Houthis in Yemen? While you are trying to negotiate with Iran, I'm going to join two questions to your calling on them to sit face to face with you for the prisoners exchange. Is there something back-chat to that? So two questions before I go back to Elliott Abrams.
And I'll try to give brief answers here. So on the first question, we have forced the regime to make a choice between guns in Yemen or butter in Iran. Because when they cut those fuel subsidies in November, they had their worst political unrest in their history. And so Iran is one of the most heavily subsidized countries in the world. And we are forcing the regime to make a choice. And we want them to choose butter in Iran. So they have less money to spend on the Houthis and on Hezbollah and on Hamas and PIJ and all these countries in the Shia Crescent that start in Lebanon and come all the way down to Yemen. So we've made Iran financially weaker, so it has less money to spend on the Houthis. The second part is that we have, our military has interdicted a number of weapons shipments that otherwise would have made their way to Yemen that could have been then used to, for the civil war in Yemen and also to attack Saudi Arabia. On the prisoner exchanges, I've now successfully conducted 2 negotiations with the Iranian regime through the Swiss. Each one of these releases takes a few months worth of talks. And I think it shows that we are able to reach agreements in spite of our differences. I'd also point out that we have now won the release of 2 Americans with no pallets of cash, no sanctions relief, and no change in policy. which I think if you had asked a lot of people in the commentariat whether that was possible, they would have said there's no way with all of this pressure and escalation that we could be able to get out 2 Americans. But we have found a way to get an agreement with the regime. President Trump would very much like this, I think, to lead to resolving our differences diplomatically. He's met with Kim Jong-un now 3 times during the course of his presidency, and the Iranians continue rejecting diplomacy.
Just so that I can take a couple of things from Elliott Abrams on this. Elliott, maybe Brian Hook is not going to tell me, but maybe you tell me, who is the back channel with Iran?
It's Elliott Abrams.
Well, we should thank the Swiss because they have a vocation here and they really do very good.
Absolutely.
A couple of quick questions to you before I go back to Minister Saidi. It's reported that President Maduro of Venezuela will visit Iran soon, in what he's calling an historic visit. Is this an issue, bilateral issue, that is none of your business as the United States, or would you interpret this as a defiance, and what would you do about it?
Well,
Elliott?
you have had statements recently from yesterday from the European Union, from Mr. Borrell, and from the International Contact Group, which is European and Latin American and Canada, denouncing these recent steps that the regime has taken. Maduro, in a certain sense, it's right for him to visit Tehran. That is the kind of vicious, brutal regime that he mimics, that he wants in Venezuela. So it's no surprise that he would visit such a place. It is interesting, though. I think one of the reasons he goes to Tehran is very few countries will now allow him to visit.
Interesting. And what about, I'm going to turn to Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Elliott Abrams, you said that the Chinese and the Russians stepped back in Venezuela, but it seems there are reports, and you tell me if they are incorrect or correct, that Recep Tayyip Erdogan is stepping in. He's enhancing contacts with Venezuela through business people, not only and otherwise. Any sanctions on the pipeline for the secondary sanctions on the business people, or directly on Turkey or Recep Tayyip Erdogan if he goes on, or is it only sanctions on Iran only and spare Turkey?
No. If we have sanctions on the oil sector, for example. We have sanctions on the regime. If Turkey violates those, then Turkish businesses, for example, will be sanctioned. You don't see much of that. I think what you have seen some shipments of gold. In previous years, they went to places like the UAE, they went to Africa, and as we have talked to governments, they have closed that down. So more recently, they've gone to Turkey. But I would say right now, if Turkish businesses engage in this kind of activity in Venezuela, we will sanction them.
Because I exhausted Brian Hook with the questions, I'm going to ask you one that is related to Lebanon, and I know you know this place very well, and it's from Paul Abi Nasser, and he asks, would the Americans dangle a Marshall Plan for Lebanon to contrast what Hezbollah is trying to do? Not just sanctions, but also the alternatives. And I think this is probably what Nasser Saidi was trying to allude to. So can you take a look at that and tell us?
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear. Nasser Saidi mentioned what Lebanon needs. It needs a lot of international cooperation. It needs an IMF program. It needs World Bank loans. It needs help from the EU and the United States. And the willingness of the United States, the EU, and others to give that help is really directly tied to the points he was making. Well, what is the government of Lebanon doing? What is the willingness of Lebanon to undertake these reforms? I think if you go back, you'll see decades of American support for Lebanon. But that support is going to be limited when you have a government that seems to be, first of all, a government that doesn't have a lot of popular support, and when you see the power of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yeah, but the Lebanese are saying, you're choking us, not only Hezbollah. Hezbollah is going to last as long as Iran decides that Hezbollah will last. So is there any, that's again back to Nasser Saidi's point and the question that we just had. You just say, you're on your own, you go rot no matter what, or are you thinking of something else? Because the talk here is about a total collapse of this country. And the government, I tell you, my view at any rate, I'm entitled to my view, and I don't see it doing anything to bring in IMF. It is not independent of Hezbollah. So is Lebanon, the Lebanese, are they to suppose that they are doomed to a total collapse of the country regardless, because that is the US policy to stay the course against Hezbollah? Please be as open as you can with me on this.
Well, it is certainly US policy to continue to resist international terrorism. And one of the worst and most powerful international terrorist groups is Hezbollah. And this is something on which the United States and the EU are in agreement. Ultimately, it is Lebanese who have to rescue Lebanon. And when they are ready to do that, I am confident that they will find the United States and the EU and all of the international financial institutions not only ready to help, but jumping at the opportunity to help. But ultimately, the country is not ours. It belongs to the Lebanese people.
I'm going to take this to be the last word from you, Elliott Abrams. I'm going to go to Nora Mueller. Go ahead, Nora Mueller, and try to combine what you want to say as the last word, unless we still have time, together with addressing the point that was just made by Elliott Abrams, that on whether the Marshall Plan or whether the rescue, and who would bring about what will it take to prevent a total collapse of this country called Lebanon? Because, of course, some say because it is Hezbollah and Iran in principle. And where is Europe on that?
Right. Thanks very much, Raghida. And before I go back to your point, I wanted to sort of set the record straight on something Brian said earlier on, saying that the JCPOA is in fact a part of a policy of accommodation. I'm not sure I would agree with this argument. I think the JCPOA is and has been a very straightforward non-proliferation agreement, purely transactional. And the aim of this deal is to keep Iran from getting the bomb. So I think the question to those who are not in support of this deal is, which regional conflict will be easier to resolve with an Iran that is nuclear armed? And on the efficiency of maximum pressure, I mean, it seems to be the case that, or it not only seems to be the case, it is the case that Iran is resuming enrichment activities, exactly the one point that the JCPOA was put in place in order to be prevented. So I think there are some question marks about maximum pressure here.
Thank you, Nora Mueller. Nasser, Saidi, I have a question for you. Please combine the last word with an answer if you can. Would you be willing to be part of a future Lebanese government as a Minister of Economy or Finance? If yes, what are the conditions, your conditions? I don't know if we have time for all the conditions, but can you combine your last word with an answer to this?
I think I and many others would certainly jump at any occasion to help our country. I have no doubt about that. But let's be very clear. Don't put Lebanon in the context of being squeezed in the confrontation between the US and Iran. We cannot afford it. The risk is you'll end up with a failed state in Lebanon. That's what we need to avoid. So to go back to what Brian Hook was saying, we need to look at the butter side of the equation rather than the arms side of the equation. So what really needs to be put on the table in front of Lebanese politicians is to tell them, you can have an IMF program, a Marshall Plan, along with the World Bank and other countries that are willing to help. They've already always expressed their interest in doing so. But there is conditionality. Be very clear about the conditionality. Let's use American power to rescue Lebanon, not to just squeeze Hezbollah and everybody else. This is what really should be on the table.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saidi. Thank you for your intervention and your participation. Last word to you, Brian Hook, and you can answer to Mr. Saidi, as well as one more question for you. They are just like there's several of this question. For the secondary sanctions that would result from the Caesars Act, I'm being asked by several people, will Mr. Gibran-Bassil be added to this list? Yes, when? This is the question to you, Brian. Last word.
Well, what I would say on that in the Caesar Act is that you are seeing the beginning of a campaign of economic and political pressure by the United States to work in the direction toward a political process which would certainly benefit the Syrian people. So I think yesterday, when this came out, this is the beginning. We've got great personnel working on this, Jim Jeffrey and Joel Rayburn, who've been devoting so much of their lives to try to help the Syrian people and to ensure the defeat of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So that work is going to continue. We would like to see an end to this war in the region. And one of the conditions, I think we've talked about reconstruction. The United States is going to withhold reconstruction assistance for Syria until all forces under Iranian command and control leave the country. Iran has got to get out of Syria. And I see increased incentives for both Putin and Assad to at some point have Iran exit. Because for as long as Iran is using Syria as a forward deployed missile base to attack Israel and as a bridge to Lebanese Hezbollah, Syria is going to be very unstable. And I think there's an increasing awareness of the role that Iran plays. They don't want the conflict to end. They don't want it to end in Yemen. They don't want it to end in Syria. They don't want it to end in the Palestinian territories. They want conflict to keep going. They want civil war in Venezuela. Those are the sort of waves they like to serve.
And the question that was addressed directly to you about the secondary sanctions and former Foreign Minister of Lebanon, Gibran-Bassil.
I'm sorry, could you give me the question? I don't quite understand it.
We're running out of time, but the question was if the secondary sanctions will get Lebanese personalities and if Minister Gibran-Bassil is amongst them.
Oh, well, we never preview our sanctions because that would give the targets a heads up to hide their assets and do whatever travel they would like. So we don't ever preview it, but more are coming.
All right, thank you very much, Brian Hook, Elliott Abrams, Nasser Saidi, and Nora Mueller. Stay with me while I announce who is going to be with us next week at the same time, and do join us. We have Nasser Judy, who is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Jordan, as well as the former Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have Shashi Tharoor, who is a member of the Indian Parliament and a former Minister, of course, on Human Resource Development. We have, just so that nobody says that I only host Republicans, we have a very prominent Democrat, Phil Gordon, who is a friend and he's a wonderful person. He is, of course, the former special assistant to President Barack Obama, and he was the White House coordinator for the Middle East, North Africa, and the Gulf. And we have Christophe Fernot, who is the director for North Africa and Middle East at the French Foreign Affairs Ministry, and he was the former ambassador of France to Greece. How grateful I am to all of you for being with me. Thank you very much for joining me. And until next week, my guests, I'm ever so grateful for your time and patience with my interventions as well. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.